Being black, you learned about two things. So I learned that Africa was a poor place and we had to send it money. And I learned that slavery was something awful. We don't really know who caused it, but it was something really bad that happened to black people. And I never learned an accurate representation of black history. I didn't learn that before slavery, Africa was a kingdom with countries and kings and queens, and there was so much to be proud about. We were scientists, you know, we had the best of everything. And, you know, Africa is one of the most material rich continents in the world. I didn't learn that in school, but what I did do as a young person was I took myself to this museum and I took myself to the third floor and I learned about slavery, but I also saw the Wall of Inspiration, which we've looked at earlier upstairs, where it showed me black heroes, you know. My name's Chantelle Lunt and I'm the founder of Merseyside BLM Alliance. So I am a former police officer and I set up Merseyside BLM Alliance because the murder of George Floyd triggered a lot of traumatic emotions for me. It made me relive my experiences of racism within the police force and also my experiences as a black person growing up in Merseyside. I grew up in one of the areas outside of the heart of Liverpool, and where I lived, I was one of only 1% of people in that area were black. So a population of only 20,000 people and only 1% were black. So I experienced racism quite overtly. My children, we still live in that area, my children went on to experience racism. So for me, when the BLM movement occurred, when George Floyd was murdered, I was determined to make people aware that we have a lot of issues of racial inequality in Merseyside, and we need to be fighting just as hard. So I set up a group called Merseyside BLM Alliance to bring together our community and to bring us together in unity and a determination to fight against racism. We set up Merseyside BLM Alliance. We've done sort of overt actions, as in we've protested racial inequalities in Merseyside. We've had some horrendous race hate crimes happen in the area, such as a young man being hacked with a machete. So we've highlighted issues such as that. We've highlighted institutional racism, such as the fact that in Merseyside, as a black person, you're 6 times more likely to have a taser pulled out against you by a police officer. And we've campaigned in all organisations, so businesses, academia, health, community, to make it everybody's job to fight against structural racial inequality. We've worked with most of the universities in Merseyside and we're just in the process of helping them implement things such as positive action, recruitment drives, changes to policies, both for students and employees, to ensure that the black community are both welcome and have the same opportunities as everybody else when they are in institutions such as academia. We've worked to highlight racial inequalities within the health service, such as the fact that as a black mother, you're 5 times more likely to die in labour or after childbirth. And we're working with organisations to highlight these issues and also understand them and prevent them going forward. So in the future, we are becoming a more structured organisation. So while BLM is very much about highlighting and campaigning around issues, we've set up a community interest company called Merseyside Alliance for Racial Equality. So the first year of BLM, we got a real feel for what was happening in Merseyside. We know that we've got quite a diasporic black community, where a lot of our community, while we have 25% of our community is in the LA Toxic area, 75% of the black community are quite scattered all over Liverpool, and as I did growing up, feel quite isolated as black people and can quite often be in a lot of danger. So we're working to bring our community together to ensure that we have community spaces, that we are decolonising the curriculum, and we're encouraging big employers to reassess their diversity and inclusion policies and ensure that their workspaces are welcoming for black people, that their workspaces are places where black people can not just exist but can thrive and progress within the workplace, and the places that black people want to work. We're basically saying to companies, if you don't have black people within your organisation, you need to ask yourselves why, because there will be a reason for that. And there are a lot of black people who live just a mile outside of our city centre, but when you do come into Liverpool city centre, you don't see much representation from the black community, and we want to change that. We want to make sure that black people aren't having to travel far away to find employment when we've got employers in this city. So we work closely with a number of organisations, the Race and Equality Task Force, and going forwards we're looking to formalise at a grassroots level and bring our community together and ensure that everybody is active, everybody in Merseyside is active and fighting in the fight against racial inequality and racism.
How do you find the effect of this museum and Liverpool's past on the Black Lives Matters campaign?
I think the history of the city is really significant, and it's something that everybody in the city should know about, but they don't know about it. So if I say Liverpool to most people, even in Liverpool, what comes to mind? Most people will say football and the Beatles. And although people sometimes celebrate the fact that we were, a port of the British Empire, they don't understand what that means. We gloss over the fact that we controlled 5/8 of the slave trade in Europe. We were the second city of the UK because of the money that came in because of slavery and colonialism. And in terms of the wealth that generated, Liverpool wasn't even a town before slavery, but because of the wealth that came into the city, we became a city, we became quite a wealthy city. If you look around our city, if you look at the big buildings, if you look at our big parks, all of that was funded by slave traders, and there's a legacy of what the slave trade did in terms of building the city up, if you want to say, on the backs of black people, yet we don't acknowledge that that's how the city was built. So we celebrate our architecture, we celebrate our football clubs, we celebrate all of those things, but we completely overlook what the city was built on. And that's not fair because, as you say, Jeremy, there's a legacy there. There's a legacy of what that racial inequality caused. So if we look at William Gladstone, for example, John Gladstone, William's father, was a slave trader. When the slave trade ended, he got the single biggest sum in reparations. He used that money to send William to the best schools in England. And William then went on to be Prime Minister. And although he decried slavery, he also fought so his dad got the biggest amount of money when slavery ended. And if you look in contrast at the black community, black people literally were freed from slavery with the clothes on the back. They had to continue to work for 5 years after it ended for free as part of the deal to end slavery. And so we've always been 10 steps behind, and that kind of inequality that lasts for generations and generations and generations. And it's so important that that knowledge is known, because that's the foundation of racial inequality. And the only way to undo that cycle of racism and to undo that cycle of inequality and to understand the black community aren't just victims of the circumstances. We've actually been, this is the starting line. We've been way back there across the road. We've been nowhere near the starting line for generations. And the only way to undo that cycle is through knowledge, is through education, and is through empowering people by decolonising the curriculum. So locations like this are absolutely fantastic, and they have a key role to play.